Hello guys, this is just going to be a quick one-shot of how to get your character rigged from Blender into Unreal. So, I have my working character here, and you can see that I have the skeletal mesh. At the skeletal mesh, it has this materials applied, the skeleton. You can click and rotate as needed to actually get the character moving. Um, you have the animation. It's just a quick temp animation that I made to make sure that I knew the process. And then the physics asset is also here and working. Um, so, to start with, I'm going to get rid of all of this working stuff. Yes, because I'm not going to save this once I'm done. And then I'm going to import my not working stuff to show you the problem that I was having. Leave it is this. Yes. Alright, so when I first imported, what would happen is that I'd have my character, and I'd have the skeleton, and I'd have the mesh. And this is a version that does not have the proper weighting to it, but that's fine because it's just a temp anyway. But it wouldn't have the animation that I imported that you guys saw just a second ago. And that's because I didn't have the proper export settings set up for Unreal. So let me see if I can't find another version that was also broken. So I'm going to reset this one. Yes. Oh no, that's just the skeleton. Left. Import. Yeah. Okay, so this is a version that actually did come in that had more things working. It had the physics asset, it had the skeleton, and it had the mesh itself, the skeletal mesh. But it did not have the animation that I had. And a problem that it also had was that I had too many bones assigned to too many different vertexes, and this was just because I didn't have the weight painting finished. So, how I fixed this was, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. I came to Blender, and by default, when you are making an armature and rigging it in Blender, the armature is named armature. Like this would normally be named armature by default, and then this is also named armature. And so what I did, based on what I saw online and what I was reading, I changed this from armature to bones, and it doesn't have to be bones. It can be literally anything. It just has to not be armature. And the reason for this is because normally what you want when you're exporting out your skeleton, your rig, is that you want everything from the root down, everything that's included in the root, the pelvis, the spine, and everything attached to it is going all the way up to the body and extending to the appendages. You want all of that exported, but what Blender does is that when you have this named as armature and you export an FBX to Unreal, Unreal interprets armature as an additional bone before root, and so because of that, it it assumes that the scale that you want is not the scale that you would expect. Because when I would import in, I don't know if I have a version of that file. When I would import the character in game, what would happen would be that I would have my rig, but it would not. Yeah, I don't think I have that version. Essentially, what would happen though is that I'd have an animation, and it would be empty. It would look empty. But if you got down really, really close to the ground after dragging it into the scene, you actually see that there was an animation, but it looks like it's right here and about the size of a thumbnail, like this size, compared to like the huge, like the normal sized Unreal character. So the way I fixed this was A, changing the name of the armature to Bones, and B, I changed my export FBX settings to, in main, I just selected armature and mesh. I kept everything here default. I kept the scale at 1. However, something that I had known from the beginning when I made this model was that I was going to be working with Unreal Scale. So I kept the scale in Blender and the scale in my scene to the scale that I wanted to import at in Blender. That way I wouldn't have to worry about any kind of that way I wouldn't have to worry about the model coming in at a huge size. But you might need to change this to 0.01 or 0.1 or 10 based on the size of your character or your Blender scene, if you've already done work on it and you don't want to mess with that, which shouldn't cause a problem. For geometry, I have smoothing turned to faces instead of normals only. I have apply modifiers on. However, the only modifier that I have running in my scene because I'm done modeling is the armature modifier. For armature settings, I have add leaf bones and I have y-axis, x-axis. These are just default settings, and the only thing I changed here was I changed this from null to root. So the armature bone is now considered, the root in the armature bone is now considered the root of your rig in Unreal 4. And then for animation, I removed a bunch of superfluous settings, the all actions, LA strips, and key all bones. These are not things that Unreal 4 currently needs, so I turned them off. And I am exporting out at FBX 7.4 instead of 6.1 because this is working for me. I've seen some people use 6.1, but I think that's with an earlier version of Blender and an earlier version of Unreal. I'm on Unreal version 4.183, and I'm using Blender 2.79. So yeah, once I exported out my mesh, I was able to come into Unreal, and I just selected this, and I selected, and I exported out my mesh and my armature and my rig at the same time, instead of separately. And I hit open, and use TOA's ref bone or ref pose as 0. This is simply because the reference pose, let's see here. In Blender, the ref pose is considered to be 0, like at rest is 0, it starts at 0 instead of at 1. So that option just tells Unreal start at 0 instead of at 1 when you're looking for the reference pose, which is just the character in their natural state. T-posed. Exported time, I kept it default. I think I kept all of these at default. I'm surprised that this is not showing up the little thing that says you've changed a setting. And then I just clicked on import. So when I import, you can see that I have my skeleton mesh, I have my animation sequence, I have, let's see, I have the physics asset, and I have my rig, which I guess points back to the skeleton. Yeah. And then for the mesh, right, I just need to apply my material. And it propagates to the entirety of the mesh. And then the animation plays, and then you can set up a simple animation blueprint just to check and see. Alright, so that's how you get your character from Blender to Unreal. I hope this was helpful. If it was, leave a comment below. If you have any questions or something was unclear, just let me know and I'll see if I can answer your questions. Yeah, thanks. Bye.